Professor Heidi Reed from the Organization Studies and Ethics Department, and I'm an Ethics of Care scholar. So today I'm talking about not just vulnerability, but invulnerability. So when we think about vulnerability, we think about something that is really negative. We think about weakness or being dependent on others or being at risk. It has this negative association. And of course, in a neoliberal capitalist society, we're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're supposed to be independent, kind of the survival of the fittest kind of style, right? But what if we were to imagine vulnerability not as something negative, but maybe more neutral? Could we even define it in a more positive way? So I'm looking a lot into the work of philosopher Erin Gilson, and she imagines vulnerability as just being open to others and openness. So it's not this negative thing, it's something that could be positive. So yes, we can be harmed when we're vulnerable, but we can also be benefited. My research looks at stigma in the workplace, and stigma, of course, is something that can make you vulnerable. So stigma might be related to attributes such as race or sexual orientation, which I looked at in my doctoral thesis. But now what I'm looking at is stigmatizing experiences. So in particular, pregnancy loss. So it's estimated that 20% of pregnancies will end in a miscarriage. Even if it's a very common experience, it remains hidden. So why? So that's one of the things I'm looking at right now. And I think it has to do with Gilson's idea of invulnerability. It's the idea of being closed. And of course, none of us is invulnerable. So it's more that we pursue invulnerability as this aspirational thing. So people don't always like it when you do research on things like pregnancy loss or disability or these other attributes or experiences, because we like to think that these things can't happen to us. And we also like to think that these things are not happening to others. We don't like to believe that the environment is at risk, because then we have to care about these things, right? And we might have to worry about them and think about them. So this is the problem with invulnerability. It allows us to not have to care about things. So certainly the work of Erin Gilson, who I talked about, and she works a lot on this idea of invulnerability and how it leads to oppression and ignorance. I also follow an amazing photographer. He's an American named Nate Gowdy, and he very powerfully captures vulnerability and invulnerability. He started out photographing drag queens, and then really became involved politically in social movements. So he photographed a lot of the protests in the US during the pandemic, which really inspired my research at that time around COVID, because you've got these people with signs saying that they're against masks, saying that they're against lockdowns, and this is really about pursuing invulnerability, right? I can't catch the pandemic, and I don't need to care about these other people who might be vulnerable and at risk. I also really appreciate the work of Joan Tronto, which you can find here in the library. They have it in French as well as in English. And she talks about the idea of a political ethics of care. And this would allow us to reimagine society based around care, with care as a central of value. And what would that mean for business? It would mean that businesses would care more than just for investors and stockholders, but they would be caring for vulnerable employees, vulnerable consumers, the vulnerable environment. And I don't think that's idealistic. I don't think that's a counter fantasy to invulnerability. I think that's really a necessity, and I think the students here at Audencia are really open to that. And again, vulnerability is not this bad thing, it's not a weakness. Being dependent on each other means that we're all connected, and we connect to each other through care.